With that, welcome you inside this edition of Big Ten Today, presented by Rally House. I'm your host, Rick Pizzo, thrilled to be joined from afar, and thanks to the magic of studio television by our good friend Yogi Roth to help break down this coming weekend inside the Big Ten. And Yogi, I know a lot of attention right now, understandably, on Oregon, Penn State. We'll get there in a little bit as well, but don't sleep on Ohio State in Seattle, where Washington never loses, and maybe a sneaky challenge for Indiana on the road against Iowa as well. I love this time of the year because as good as the previous weekend was, we always have the next weekend to look forward to.
I love this time of the day. We get to hang out and talk football for about an hour, man. It's going to be an absolute blast. And I think coming off of the weekend, I echo everything that you said. But I just love 4 weeks in, we're looking at new faces, especially under center, just continually finding more comfort, whether that's Bryce Underwood at Michigan, whether that's Fernando Mendoza in his fourth game in the system at IU under Curt Cignetti. I mean, wherever you look, even Damon Williams, I know he had 2 starts a year ago, but you're just looking at the comfort level grow. And I think we're starting to find out who these teams truly are, what their identity is. The coaches are figuring out what works, and now we get to see it play out in a full conference slate.
Malik Washington from Maryland as well, maybe as physically talented as any freshman quarterback in the country. We'll talk about all those guys coming up in just a second, but we start with the big story presented by Rally House and a look at the Big Ten inside the AP Top 25. Ohio State holding firm at number 1. Penn State did drop from idle position, number 2 to number 3. One of the biggest moves in the country this past week was made by Indiana. After beating Illinois, then number 9 in the country, by some 53 points, the Hoosiers launching themselves all the way up to number 11 in this week's poll. And this is not a one-week thing for Indiana. It's a 2-year deal under Coach Sig. Ever since Curt Cignetti arrived in Bloomington before the start of the 2024 season, no team in the country has even come close to beating its opposition by the margin Indiana has. Next closest, Ohio State. Average margin of victory during that span, just under 25 points per game. Indiana has beaten its opposition by nearly 31 points per game. Yogi, I know it's something of an anomaly to beat any top 10 team by 53. As Curt Cignetti said after the win over Illinois, we broke their will, we took their spirit. That's exactly what Indiana did. There was so much talk this year, will we see the real Indiana? The 2024 schedule was simply weak. Indiana is now a legitimate contender, not just in the Big Ten, Yogi, but to get back to the college football playoff.
Yeah, it's really impressive. You know, we called this game a week ago a CFP entrance exam, and let's just go flying colors, like perfect score from Indiana and Curt Cignetti. Props to the crowd. It was an epic atmosphere. Brett Bielema referenced that many times, being on the opposite sideline. And I think a few things about this. One, let's start big picture, because I think a year ago, after watching Indiana go on the run, you're thinking, hey, this is the new recipe. Get a coach from a lower level, bring 20 players with you, you can compete immediately. And they did that, and it was really impressive. And I get it. People can bemoan the schedule or their lack of big-time wins a year ago. Look, there are only 2 losses under Curt Cignetti, or the 2 teams that played in the Natty a year ago. So then we fast forward to today and reality, and we are seeing, to me, in this era, one of the most gifted head coaches, I think, in the country. Why? His teams are so steady. They're so consistent. You can go back to IUP, to Elon, to JMU, and, of course, the last year and change at Indiana. And you're looking at teams in every phase, Rick, play a level of football that is their standard, whether it's returning players like Elijah Surratt or new faces like we talked about earlier in Fernando Mendoza. And that's the thing that just continually jumped out. The effort every snap, and Coach Cignetti referenced it yesterday in his media availability, of every timeout for the most part, they didn't dip. And I think that's impressive for a new team that is not necessarily comfortable being the star in major college football. Don't they look comfortable being the star? Like, the moment has never gotten too big. They didn't have as much talent as Notre Dame or Ohio State a year ago, but when they do have that and they can line up across from you, they played their best game. They didn't roll with the ebbs and flows of the emotions of that game in that stadium.
And they are still playing with the chip on their shoulder. Somehow, Curt Cignetti's doing a little bit what Mark D'Antonio did during the heyday of Michigan State. even though you're really good and you go to the college football playoff, you find a way to motivate your team by telling them no one believes in you. And most of the world believed that this was Illinois' game to win. Illinois had already been down to Duke, knocked off Duke handily. They were the much higher ranked of the two teams heading into this matchup, though it was Indiana. All that being said, Yogi, I actually like what Curt Cignetti did immediately after the game as much as I did leading up to the game. He said, I can't wait to go watch the film because I know we made a lot of mistakes, especially on the back end. And during his press conference on Monday, Yogi, he doubled down. He said, we made egregious mistakes in the second half. He is not in any way, shape, or form going to allow this team to look past its next opponent, because that next opponent is a dangerous Iowa team on the road this coming Saturday.
Yeah, and it's no surprise when you look at Coach Sig's background, right? His dad's a Hall of Fame coach. He worked for Coach Saban. Like, it felt as though, like, nothing was ever good enough. I remember talking to him many times about his dad and, like, the influence that he's had and what he might say after a great season. I think he even told us in the preseason, he'd say, well, it wasn't good enough. You know, so there is a constant edge to this team. But I think it's really healthy. I think some teams sometimes can make it all about the bulletin board material. I think this team has a real inner belief. And what I love about Coach Sig, and maybe it's his time in the game, but he's a truth teller, right? Like, he's some of the best content we've ever seen. Sometimes he's got to hold himself back, like he did post-game after that win over Illinois. But fundamentally, they will be a team that will physically just take it to you. Like, I get the back-end mistakes, and every team's going to have them. But this defensive front was dominant against an offensive line that had rave reviews coming into the season. This offensive line stymied a defensive front seven. And I get all the injuries in the back end for Illinois, but they couldn't stop the run, right? When you look at over 300 yards rushing offensively for Indiana and -1 yard rushing for Illinois, like, it just kind of tells the story. And I think that's important to get that narrative out there. This isn't just skill and spraying the ball all over the yard. I mean, they are winning in the trenches physically, and that to me was tremendously impressive. And I think going into Iowa, I've got Rutgers this weekend, so I went back and I've been studying the Iowa game. I was impressive at the line of scrimmage. So that is where this battle will be won, and I think it's another opportunity to make a statement prior to a bye for Indiana's program.
I love it. One of the big questions surrounding Indiana heading into this season, what about Curtis Rourke being gone? Who fits in? How about Fernando Mendoza, now one of the favorites to win the Heisman after two basically perfect games back-to-back with 10 total touchdown passes? Another very good quarterback, but a guy much earlier in his career in Ann Arbor. That's Bryce Underwood, and he's doing it obviously in a different fashion than Mendoza is. Michigan's doing it in a different way than Indiana is. They did it the last two games without their head coach, as Sharon Moore was suspended. Biff Poggi stepped in and did a terrific job for Michigan. I just think Underwood, he kind of sets the tone, obviously, Yogi, as most freshmen or most quarterbacks do. But as a freshman, I was really impressed the way he handled himself and the composure he showed in Lincoln after what had happened just a few weeks prior against Oklahoma on the road.
You know, Rick, it's a really fun comp when you look at Fernando Mendoza and Bryce Underwood. Why? Okay, here's Fernando in game 4, and he barely throws an incompletion, really the last 2 times out. But we're seeing his comfort grow. When you watch Bryce Underwood, his stat line is nowhere near what Fernando Mendoza's is, but I look at the Oklahoma game and Nebraska game. Comp those two environments, pretty ridiculous, raucous crowds, energy, expectations, etc. And I thought we saw a different player in Bryce Underwood, somebody who just allowed the game to come to him, whether that's scrambling as the pocket breaks down, whether it's checking the ball down, or whether it's getting his team in and out of the right play. And I think Chip Lindsey, much like Mike Shannon at Indiana, the offensive coordinator for Michigan, has to get a ton of credit, because I think there's a huge part of almost when you have a young quarterback, you have to de-emphasize the importance of that position early on in a game on the road, meaning you have to run the football. It have to be high percentage play calls, easy reads, half-field reads. Just get the ball out, get some mojo going. Well, I went back and watched this one. I think it was exactly that with Bryce Underwood. I mean, young quarterbacks, and I think Bryce is special. We know how gifted he is. But it is a very critical position where you can get in your own psyche. You want to play so well. You pour so much into it. I thought the way they're calling the game, the way they're easing into games, the way they're utilizing the legs of Bryce Underwood is so impressive on so many different layers. Then you're watching the situational football, and it looks as though every week, I've been there before. I've been there before. And when you can run the football, that obviously helps. When you get chunk runs like they did in the offensive line, that obviously helps. And I'm watching the tight ends, the wideouts block downfield. This whole thing to me, looks like a group that is absolutely locked in. And I think your point of Sharon Moore not being there the last 2 weeks has forced this team to dial it in even more. And you're watching hand placement, foot placement. I mean, the offensive line, which we know Sharon Moore has a big background there. He spent a lot of time there the last time he was with the team during the week of practice after the Oklahoma game. I watch this outfit. I'm saying, is this the best offensive line in the Big Ten? I mean, they're in the conversation in the way they move the line of scrimmage, especially on a lot of those big runs. I mean, they're fit really well from Nebraska. The block is just better than the fit, and then it just goes for 40, 50, 60 yards, and it's explosive plays for the majority of the afternoon in the run game.
Of course, it helps when you have one of the nation's top rushers in Justice Haynes. It's a quarterback-driven league, quarterback-driven sport. You have terrific running backs like Jonah Coleman, obviously up in Seattle. Justice Haynes very quietly having a running back of the year type season already for Michigan. And you know, with that mentality that you just talked about, Yogi, and Sharon Moore's background, Michigan is not going away from the run anytime soon. Hey, let's go to your backyard and what we've seen from USC. I mean, Jaden Mayava's been terrific. Lincoln Riley knew heading into this year that this was going to be a make it or break it year for USC. And so far, much more make it than break it. Obviously, the meat of the schedule coming up. But so far, Yogi, I love what I have seen from Mayava and this offense. And I think the defense is good enough.
Yeah, look, Indiana, Michigan, USC, these are legitimate threats to win the Big Ten Conference. Legitimate. And SC is as good as I have seen under Lincoln Riley. I might argue it's as complete of a team as they've had since I was on the staff 20 years ago coaching with Pete Carroll. Why? They've always had wideouts. They've always had a quarterback. I'm going to the defensive front, man. I mean, honestly, this front seven, this defensive line have gotten after it. Every week they continue to improve. Eric Henderson, the defensive line coach who coached Aaron Donald, former Pitt Panther, and of course a Hall of Famer in the National Football League when he's allowed to get in. And you also just look at Sean Nua, who played in the NFL, spent time in Michigan, another big-time coach. And the way they've developed this front is so impressive. Number one, they're big body. Like, it's cliche, but you enter the Big Ten, you got to get bigger. They knew that. They got that. And they are explosive. And they're rotating 6, 7 guys on the defensive line. Then you add in the athletic Eric Gentry, who's leading the Big Ten in tackles for loss right now. He's so impressive, so rangy. They are disrupting the line of scrimmage, Rick. And that is where SC has not shown up in recent years. You could argue decade plus. It's been a long time since that defensive front wasn't out where you're like, whoa, we got to double somebody. We have to chip someone. We've got to keep a tight end in. I mean, they have the ability to dominate games. Now, the challenge is the competitive depth that they have. They are not there like Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon is right now. Neither is any of the contenders we're talking about. So if they can stay healthy, look out, because they are going to put points on the board. This is an offense I think comes at you in waves. They're running the ball with Wayman Jordan. They call him Waymo out here in LA. See if we can get him a little NIL deal. It's pretty impressive for him. The junior college transfer running all over the field. You reference Mayava. He has grown as much as anybody in this league from last year in his 4 starts to now in terms of the ball location, the anticipation, the timing. Quarterback coach Luke Heward, got to give him a big-time hat tip and the way he's developed him. And then the playmakers. We always talk about Ohio State, rightfully so. You talk about Mekhi Lemon as one of the top receivers in the country, let alone in the Big Ten. Losing Jacoby Lane, we'll see how that shakes out. But the Trojans are a threat. They will have a huge test this weekend. It's a 9 a.m. body clock game. We know what the West Coast teams did a year ago. Going on the road, they struggled, called a bunch of those games. How do they get up for this? And they're going to get the best version of Illinois to find out who's really the threat. Illinois is going to want to have a big bounce-back game. But I look at this game this weekend as another CFP-type entrance exam. And I think the Trojans should put people on notice because I don't know many defenses that are going to be able to stop USC. Maybe slow them down, but way too many weapons. We'll see what happens on the O-line. They lose Elijah Page over the weekend. Hopefully he's not gone for too long. We'll see if he plays this weekend. But they had to make shuffles on the offensive front, and that's where the competitive depth thing's really going to showcase.
One issue for Illinois defensively right now, they are really banged up, especially in that back four, in that secondary. Jaden Mayava has to be looking at some of those second and third stringers playing corner and safety, thinking this could potentially be a field day. But again, Illinois is going to be motivated at home, full cross-country road trip for USC. Meanwhile, Washington gets to stay at home, where the Huskies over the last couple of years have been as good as anybody. That's the good news. The bad news, you have the best team, the highest-ranked team in the country in Ohio State coming to visit this weekend. Jed Fish told us, Yogi, during media days out in Vegas, and he was not shy about it, that he loved this football team, thought that this team could make as big a jump from last year to this year as any team he'd ever been a part of. And so far, Jedd Fisch sounds like he knew exactly what he was talking about.
Yeah, I think they're a legitimate threat. We'll see how they as well navigate the competitive depth. Some big injuries, right? Takario Davis at corner. Will he go? Will he not? TBD. Doesn't sound like Buda Alukta, their inside linebacker, is going to go this week. Another impact player in the middle for them. So they'll be tested in that regard. But when you go up to Montlake, when you go to the greatest setting, that is a place. That's where magic can happen, man. I can remember number 3 USC goes up there. This is when Steve Sarkisian is his first year as a head coach. And UW takes down USC. I mean, this place is primed for an upset when you look at just the vibe of the place. The challenge is Ohio State's coming off a bye week, so we'll see how this one shakes out. But overall, with the focus on Washington, the offensive line, the most improved offensive line in this league from last year to this year. Denzel Boston, talk about wideouts. We just referenced Mekhi Lemon. Denzel Boston is a legitimate Biletnikoff candidate. I mean, you might have all 3 finalists coming from this league in Lemon, Boston, and of course Jeremiah Smith when we get to December. So really talented there. And I think Jonah Coleman's the best back in the country. What he can do out of the backfield, how he runs, how he never really takes direct shots. He's so impressive. They're going to have to feed him in this game and eliminate a possession or two from Ohio State in what will just be a magnificent atmosphere. The defense will be the test. They got to just try to slow down this outfit. So it'll be fun to watch. And the X's and O's, man, you've got Jedd Fisch calling the plays against Matt Patricia. And what's the commonality? Coach Bill Belichick. I mean, he's been around both of them, has an influence on both of them. If you love football and the X's and O's, you are going to see a great game plan from Washington up against, it's going to be a big-time game plan. Where's Caleb Downs? He's spying Damon Williams. I mean, this game will have all of the things you dream of from a football nerd standpoint, from an X and O standpoint, that I think we've had in the early part of this season.
Yogi, I'm glad you bring that up because there are a lot of head coaches who call plays in college football that are talked about as being geniuses, offensive brainiacs. For some reason, Jedd Fisch is often left out of that conversation. I would argue that this guy calls as good a game as anybody that I've seen in recent memory.
Yeah, I don't know who's leaving him out of those conversations. I definitely would never do that. I've known Jedd for almost 20 years. He's always been a guy with tremendous acumen as a play caller. And then you look at the staff with Jimmy Doherty and company, who's coaching the quarterbacks as the offensive coordinator as well. It's really impressive. And when you watch them, they're very rarely in a bad play. And if you do call a bad one, you got Damon Williams, who can get you out of it with his legs. You just look no further than what he's done with his legs. He's the most rushing yards in the country when it comes to the quarterback position, and he can just make you pay. And I think that'll be the challenge here. So will Washington and Jedd Fisch, he'll have an answer. Will he decide to go tempo? Will he try to change the play under 15 seconds because he knows Patricia can't talk to his communicator on the defensive side? I mean, that's where I think this game will go. And make no mistake about it, Jedd Fisch is an NFL mind, an NFL caliber, to me, coordinator, head coach. I mean, his ceiling is so high at this profession. And then you just look at the system and the quarterbacks that he's had. You can go back to Cam Newton in the National Football League. You can go back, obviously, to Damon Williams. You can go back to Noah Fafita at Arizona a couple years ago, and he was the head coach there. It's always tailored to the playmaker. And even this season, Washington really did a deep dive into dual threat quarterbacks, guys like Lamar Jackson, guys that can really impact the game with their legs. It's like, all right, how are we going to add a wrinkle to our game? And I think that'll be the real challenge. Like, you're going to see best on best. Watch all the movement. It's going to be really fun to watch come Saturday afternoon.
Washington balance is crazy. One of just 7 teams in the country averaging 250 on the ground, 250 through the air. They're number 2 in all of FBS football at nearly 56 points per game. Coming up next here on Big Ten Today, what's next for the Illini after that shocking Saturday loss in Bloomington? Yogi offers his take on how he expects the Fighting Bielemas to bounce back.
At a loss for words. I mean, I've never been a part of anything like that. We just didn't have answers for what they were doing, and they kept pouring it on, which was exactly what they should do. The way it unfolded, it looked like we just didn't belong in that moment, and that was the concerning part to me. And we have to own this moment, and the thing that we do need to take into account is our response, right? Like, what the response is what's going to define us.
I got to tell you, one of the many reasons I love Brett Bielema, he just tells it like it is. Rick Pizzo, Yogi Roth back with you on Big Ten today. Yogi, that was Brett after that disheartening, disappointing. You could throw any disadjective that you want into that. 63-10, they lose to Indiana. So now the question is, how quickly can you move forward? And the even better question, Yogi, is how do you move forward with USC coming into town this Saturday?
You know, I'm going to steal a line from our good friend Chris Peterson, who you see every weekend on Fox as the games are rolling. He says the best teams, when adversity strikes, you have a choice. You can react or you can respond. And the reaction is often like where the flag comes out, right? You throw a punch, you're frustrated. The response is the work that has real depth to it. And you know Brett Bielema as well as anybody. I've got a chance to get to know him over the last couple seasons. And his team is going to do what he just said, which was respond. I just love what he did on Sunday. Right? They came in, they watched the film, which makes you sick to your stomach as a coach and a player after that performance, because this is a team that was owning the hype, and they were excited about it. They're like, this is what you play for. Well, we've heard that many times from this program. And then he said, okay, we watched it, go have dinner, and then come back and reset, and let's start preparing for USC. That's what the best coaches do. That's what the best cultures do. They wear it, they learn from it, and then they move forward. And I think this team's veteran element, whether it's on the offensive front, whether it's Luke Altmaier, whether it's guys on the defensive front, and I know they're banged up in the back end, but they've got a veteran, mature approach to them. Every time you're around them or talk to them, talk to the staff. So I think that they're going to respond really well. The challenge is, like, how healthy are you going to be? When we're looking at the game coming up against USC, that's going to be a challenge. And then how do you run the football? I think this one thing that will happen, that happens to every team after they have a loss like this in a season, even if it's not as dramatic as this one, but one where you're like, oh, God, we didn't have answers. And that's what he said many times. They didn't have answers. They're going to go back on offense and defense and do what they do best. And I love that. I think we will see the most efficient Illinois team on both sides of the ball, from Aaron Henry and Barry Lunny Jr., the defensive and offensive coordinator, respectively, Rick. And I think that's going to allow this team to play their best game. It's a proud program. It's a proud head coach. And this is a guy who's been around a ton, right? He has seen so many different environments and experiences where you have to respond. So not worried, actually, one iota of how they respond. I know they will. To me, the challenge is going to be like, how long can you hold up injury-wise? What does the depth really look like? I thought about all the contenders and the threats. We just talked about 4 of them in the previous block. Illinois is still in that conversation as a threat to go win this league. I don't think, this isn't a team that could have a shot at making a real run here to get back in the conversation for the Big Ten title. But they got to get a win, and they need to get one where they're really confident. And then the last thing I'll say, the best teams, they know things work out for themselves. The ones where things are challenging, they hope it works out. I'd imagine this locker room is kind of sitting in between right now. Who are we? Where are we? What's our reality? So it's going to be on the play calling and really the crescendo of the week into Saturday to get this team's confidence back. Because they'll get it shaken again when they play on Saturday. But how do they respond, to use his words, to that will be the biggest question of the weekend.
I am concerned, though, Yogi, with that offensive line. You mentioned the inability right now to run the ball. They have veterans on the inside. They've also allowed 16 sacks. That's more than any other Big Ten team. That USC defensive line, as you just described it, is better than it has been in a long time. That'll be a huge test for Illinois coming up this weekend. And now to the game that Yogi's been looking for weeks. Saturday, Big Ten Tailgate is live from the Twin Cities with all the pregame festivities leading you into Minnesota Rutgers. Then Jared DiNardo joins me for Countdown to Kickoff. Take you on the field right before all the action begins. Starts Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific, only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. So it is Rutgers, Minnesota. During the break, Yogi, I said to you, I think this is a sneaky, sexy game. Yes, I know Minnesota lost 2 Saturdays ago to Cal. Yes, I know Rutgers just lost to Iowa. But there's so much familiarity between these two staffs. I love Rutgers' offense. Minnesota just always seems to find a way when you don't expect them to find a way, and you will find your way to the Twin Cities to call this one.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, if you took a transcript of both PJ Flex and Greg Schiano's press conferences and just took out row the boat and chop, you wouldn't know which coach said what. I think the similarities between these two, outside of like specific vernacular, is amazing. And I think when you look at, of course, the DNA traits that they both have shared in staff rooms, whether it was in Tampa Bay when PJ was working with Greg Schiano or at Rutgers, they bleed throughout both of their respective programs. And they're really proud programs. And I think when you look at their most recent games, to the one you referenced on the West Coast at Cal late night game or the late night game on a Friday night where Rutgers lost to Iowa, there were opportunities, missed opportunities, in my opinion, where they both could have become victorious. So how do they respond, right? That's the phrase we've been using in this segment. I think they're going to respond beautifully. I can't wait for this game. And to me, some of my favorite parts of calling games is when coaches have to make decisions, right? 4-down territory, are we going to go for it? Backed up 2-minute drill, what are we going to do at the end of a half? Do we go for 2? Do we have a surprise on side? And now you've got two coaches that have been in these conversations intimately on the same staff. So there's a world where, are they anticipating what the other head coach is thinking, what he might be telling his coordinators or his quarterbacks? And then you add in the Ethan Kaliak-Manis factor, which I get, like he's moved past and the staffs have moved past. Nobody wants to address it. But how often do you get this? A quarterback who started at one school, Minnesota, and now is thriving at his other school with a former offensive coordinator from said school in Kirk Ciarrocca. I just think it's made for great television and for great execution come game day. And then I think when we get to the play, Ethan Kaliak-Manis is the most improved quarterback in this league from a year ago to now. And I thought last year he improved as the year went on. I think his discernment is at an extremely high level. I think his ball placement, his confidence, and the way he's letting it rip from the pocket, how he's standing strong in the pocket is so impressive. Then you add in his legs. I mean, you saw him leap over a defender in the game on Friday night. It was the last time we ever saw Ethan Kaliak-Manis do that. So I'm excited to watch him. And then I think Drake Lindsey is one of those stars, one of the young quarterbacks. We talked Malik Washington, Bryce Underwood, Dylan Raiola, these first or second year players. Aiden Childs, second year at Michigan State. You got to talk about Drake Lindsey like that. I really think we're going to see continued growth for him coming off a bye, lessons learned. And PJ Fleck referenced it earlier this week. He's not just leading the offense. In the bye week, he started to lead the whole team. I can't wait to dive into that once we get to campus on Thursday of this week.
They need a healthy Darius Taylor. It's that simple. They're a different football team with Darius Taylor healthy and in the game than they are without Darius Taylor available. And I'm glad you brought up Kirk Ciarrocca. You know, Rob Smith's part of that group as well. Yeah. Other position coaches. They've gone back and forth. They've swapped staffs. There is so much familiarity and I would say comfort, but maybe at some point a little bit of, I want to show you that I don't need the guy that you already took from me, and I think we'll see that on the field on Saturday. Should be really fun up in the Twin Cities.
Yeah. You know what would be fun? I'll just put this request in now. Like, can we get them both mic'd up in pregame?
I'm going to go with no. I'm going to tell you right now the answer is no. I love the request, though. You can, hey, you can ask. All they can do is say no, and trust me, they're going to say no. Still to come, it is number 3 versus number 6 in a conference championship game rematch. A full breakdown of what you should expect inside Beaver Stadium when Penn State squares off with Oregon. That's coming up next here on Big Ten Today. Should you not have ever been lucky enough in your life to get to State College for a night game, Penn State against a quality opponent with a whiteout? To steal a quote from Ferris Bueller, if you have the means, I highly recommend it. It is an environment that will not disappoint you, and we get it this Saturday, Yogi, with Penn State, number 3 in the country, Oregon, number 6 in the country. It's a rematch of last year's Big Ten championship game. We had this one circled as soon as the schedule came out. Now, Penn State comes off a bye. Oregon is undefeated and getting back into conference play after knocking off Oregon State. All the pieces have fallen into place to give us one of those early season matchups, the likes of which we don't see all that often.
Tell you what, can I steal a quote from Tom Brady?
You can do anything you want.
You know exactly what what he says, his little acronym. That is exactly how I see this game. Like, let's go. This one is going to be awesome. The build-up is everything that you reference, and then you look at the players on the field. By my count, I checked in with some people in the NFL last night, about 20-plus NFL prospects in this game, like eligible today, not youngsters, not draft eligible, but like eligible today. Cannot wait to see that type of talent because we haven't seen it on the field in the conference game thus far this season. So it's going to be best versus best. We know how Dan Lanning's going to prepare his team for the stage. What we don't know is a lot of these new faces, how they're going to react to that stage. On the inverse, we look at Penn State, and listening to James Franklin earlier this week, it sounds like we're going to see a healthy dose of Deni Dennis Sutton and Zane Durant. Like the rotations that we saw through their first few games of the season, doesn't seem like that's going to happen in the whiteout. So we are going to see the best of each program. And you just go back to the Big Ten championship game, little less than a year ago. That was awesome. It was a heavyweight bout, back and forth. Drew Aller throws a pick and then throws a touchdown. I mean, it was just amazing to watch this thing shake. I think we're going to see that again in this ballgame. So what does it come down to? To me, it's the line of scrimmage. This Penn State offensive line has not been as dominant as we anticipated coming into the season. So what do they look like in this game? Katron Allen, does he get a bulk of carries? There's been so much talk about his body and what he did over the summer. And I know they got two, he and Nicholas Singleton, but overall, is Allen going to be that guy, game on the line, going to get the rock? And then you look at the style in which both teams will play. Like, I don't know if you follow James Casey on Twitter, but he's always like showcasing really cool, creative plays offensively. Heading into that Big Ten title game last year, I had a coach at Oregon come up to me and be like, he's going to have a great time this one with Andy Kotelnicki and Will Stein. Gear it up again, man. I mean, it's going to be so fun watching both of these teams schematically try to put themselves in advantageous situations. And then on the flip side, I'm talking about the defensive front of Oregon. We love talking about Dante Moore. Nobody more than me. I think he's the best quarterback in this league. I've said it many times. Love talking about the backfield and the variety of backs. And Kenyon Sadiq, we know Jake loves him, and he should. He might be the best tight end in America. But how about this defensive front? Mateo Uyunglele and company, Amari Washington and company, Tatum Tuioti and company. How about Bryce Betcher in the game he had a week ago in his final one play in the rival Oregon State? This is a veteran outfit in their third, fourth, fifth year within this program. They've all been within this defense of Tosh Lupoy, the coordinator for the Ducks. So I want to see the trenches again. And that, to me, is where this game will be won. And then we'll see how the Ducks navigate the emotion, because that is a first. That is a first for Dante Moore going into a stage like this. How do they navigate it? How do they handle it? What are certain play calls like? And then my last one, I'll go back to what I said earlier. In big games with these two coaches, James Franklin and Dan Lanning, what do they decide to do when it's four-down territory? What do they decide to do when the crowd rises and Oregon's on offense? Do they go for it? Do they try something on special teams? When does the trick play come into the fridge red zone area? They'll be up. And that, to me, will be what this game is about. And then the best part, because we'll have a great game, is that when it's over, neither one of these teams is going to be eliminated from anything, because I think they're so talented when you're looking at the Big Ten and the future of where the playoff sits a couple months from now.
I thought it was fascinating on Monday during his weekly press conference. James Franklin kind of intimated that the offensive playbook has not been opened at all so far through the first 3 weeks. And they didn't really need to, so that they will show some things now that they haven't showed anybody over the first 3 weeks of non-conference play. So I think now we actually get to see what Andy Kotelnicki's offense without Tyler Warren looks like. You just have to do it against one of the best defenses in the country. And by the way, I'm not checking that out or following that on Twitter. I'm one of the 6 social media free people in the world in 2025, Yogi. So now you can.
God bless you.
Now you can put that on your need to know, I no longer need to know basis. I need to know what you think about Ohio State, Washington, because I understand the Buckeyes are number 1 in the country. I know very few teams have anybody that can cover Jeremiah Smith. Now, Washington may have been one of those teams before a few injuries, but I just sense in that environment, with Washington feeling like nobody is giving them the respect that they deserve, that this game could end up being sneaky close into the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think Washington has to survive the first quarter. I really do, because Ohio State, as you know, they are so talented. They're coming off a bye week. I got to imagine the energy within that facility was just like it was in the first couple weeks of the season. The standard not changing at all, and also knowing what's coming here with Big Ten play and the run that Ohio State is hoping to go on. I think one truth is you go back to last year and you watch Ohio State at Oregon, and I think this happens with a lot of the Big Ten teams coming out west for the first time, especially to places like Eugene and Seattle, is I don't want to say you're shocked by how loud it is, but you never experienced it before. We talked often about the West Coast teams struggling going on the road last year. Like, that's been well documented. But I think coming out to Eugene last year, Ohio State was like, whoa, They are on top of you. It is loud. They're faster than you'd imagine. I think that example for this year's Buckeyes team, and I get it's a lot different, especially defensively, but I think it's going to bode well for the program of going into Husky Stadium because it will be a scene. It'll be as loud as they have seen all season long, and you could argue in a couple seasons. I mean, the noise is trapped in at Husky Stadium. It rocks. The stadium shakes. And the place is juiced up, and they should be. Jedd Fisch has it going, right? The first time since he's been the head coach there. There's a lot of healthy optimism around this team. So if Washington can survive the first quarter and not get hit with big play, explosive, big run, all of a sudden it's 17-3. If they can survive, then you're right. This thing is an opportunity to play late into the evening as the sun sets over Montlake. The way that happens, though, is, to me, Damon Williams. He's got to win this thing, not just with his arm and his legs, but with his mind. He's going to see so many different looks from Matt Patricia. We talked about it earlier, whether it's linebackers lining up in different gaps, whether it's Caleb Downs playing a deep safety, a half safety, a linebacker, spying Damon Williams. I would predict that's going to happen for the majority of this ballgame because why wouldn't it? Damon is such a threat with his legs. I think his decision-making is going to be tested. And I would imagine the number one thing both head coaches are going to say to their young quarterbacks, both Elite 11 alums, both in their second year, he's going to say to them, be boring. Like, take the easy things. And I think early on in the game, I think you'll see both coordinators, Jedd Fisch, of course, calling it for Washington. I think they're going to call the game, and Hartline as well on the other side for Ohio State. I think they're going to try to de-emphasize the quarterback a little bit. I think they try to run the football, settle in within the crowd, and then see if they could take one shot. That's what I would do if I was calling this game. I think we'll have that. And I think we got a shot if the Dogs can survive early on to have a heck of a ball game. But it's going to be the big plays, to your point, especially if two key players, Buda Alupta and Takario Davis, are not going to play for Jedd Fisch's team. Those are huge losses when you're playing the number one team in America.
Yogi, I have an admission to make before we leave this conversation. Husky Stadium is the only Big Ten stadium in which I have never stepped foot, and I would love it if you could help remedy that problem.
Okay, got it. I'm on it. And
is this a big ticket? Is this a tough ticket to get this coming weekend?
I think it is, but I think we know some people. I think we can make that happen. We'll give you a tour of the facility. It's brand new. They refurbished everything. As Jedd Fisch said yesterday, not even one old TV. Every TV screen in that facility is brand new. So nice job by him and Pat Chun.
Perfect. We've got a commercial break coming up, 2 minutes and 40 seconds. When we come back, I expect to have some tickets on the iPad. Coming up next here on Big Ten Today, we focus on Yogi's favorite topic, quarterback play. An insider's look at how some of the young fellas are playing at a level well beyond their respective youth. You get a 0 in the loss column, and you get a 0 in the loss column. You get the point. 7 unbeatens remain in the Big Ten as we have finished 4 full weeks of play. And of those 7, several are led by either freshman or first-year full-time starting quarterbacks in their system. Rick Pizzo back with Yogi Roth. Let's start with one of the unbeatens in a team that needed to be unbeaten through its first 4 weeks. The Maryland Terrapins took care of business in the non-con, then picked up a very important road win against Wisconsin. He is not getting the same hype as Bryce Underwood or some other freshman quarterbacks in the country. But, Yogi, when you look at the skill set of Malik Washington, I'm not sure that there is another freshman out there who is as physically gifted as the Terps quarterback.
Yeah, I think it's fair. Like, all we can do is evaluate on what we've seen. He hasn't gone down to Norman, hasn't gone out to Nebraska. But you comp freshman quarterbacks around the country. Jaron Sagapolatelli is playing well at Cal. We saw him against Minnesota. I think Malik's playing the most consistent among the bunch with what we've seen through 4 wins. I had a chance to call the one over the weekend. And at 6'4", 231 pounds, you're wondering, all right, is the moment ever going to get too big? No, he stands strong in the pocket and delivered time and time again. My favorite part of the game is that he's got an opportunity on a 3rd down to kind of ice the game and force a throw. He doesn't, and he runs out of bounds, right, and punts the ball away. Like, just understanding the situation. Another one is that he missed a touchdown late in the second half on a corner route, and he came to the sideline, and he was like, yeah, I know I missed it, right? Lessons learned. We're rarely seeing Malik Washington make the same mistake twice, and a huge part of that is how he's being trained. you got to talk about Mike Loxley and offensive coordinator Pep Hamilton and give them a ton of praise. This is a guy who was injured in training camp, so we're watching him play catch-up. Doesn't look like that as he's changing plays at the line of scrimmage, when he's throwing absolute dimes and darts like you just saw there down the field, deep play action, under center, turning your back to the defense. He's playing at a high level when it comes to decision-making and then where the ball is going from a location standpoint. I think he's got a chance to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And then you look at Maryland overall, the amount of young players they're playing, the freshman class that came in, 14 of the freshmen came from the DMV area, Baltimore, Maryland, D.C. community, Northern Virginia. They're following the lead of Malik Washington. And they got a bye, and then they get Washington. But you look at their games, there's a chance they could be 7-0. I mean, it's a real conversation we need to get into. So the way they've molded and developed Malik Washington is impressive. They're not asking him to do too much early in the game. They understand that it's a growth position and his care factor's through the roof. And the way that they are allowing him to thrive with the plays they're calling and then the way he's competing and learning in real time on the field, I think it's as good as any freshman we've seen in a while start at quarterback, definitely in a while at Maryland.
Bye week for the Terps this weekend. Also a bye week for Bryce, Underwood, and Michigan. We discussed the fact that he struggled on the road at Oklahoma, came back and made better decisions against Nebraska. Where do you think he is in the trajectory in comparison to where we thought he was going to be at this point, Yog?
Well, okay, where we thought, I think he's great. I think where the world, I know you're not on the internet and social media, I think the expectation was ridiculous. I think that's the era we live in the state of college football. But his progression is really impressive to watch. I think the number one trait at quarterback is competitive temperament. 2 is accuracy and ball location. But once you get into the room, the next thing is like, what's your it factor, right? Like, are you seeking knowledge? And by it factor, I mean people feeling your presence and you making them better. Listen to everybody talk about him, from training camp to week 1, after a loss, after last week's win. The way that locker room has reverence for him is so impressive. I mean, they're following him. And to be, at his age and going into a huddle, and you got to look guys in the eye that are, 4 or 5 years older than you, to me is really impressive. And I love how the schedule sets up for them, right? They get this bye, and he gets to take a breath. The hype, the expectation has been too much. But that's the reality of Michigan and playing quarterback there and being a freshman starting at quarterback there. But now I'd imagine Sharon Moore and company, they allow him just to take a minute. Chip Lindsey, the offensive coordinator, and that's going to be the best thing for him. Reset. I think they got 4 or 5 in a row. Take another bye, reset, and see if you can finish the season strong.
Let's transition now to guys who have been starters before. Fernando Mendoza at Cal was highly sought after in the transfer portal, decided to go to Indiana. In the last 2 games, he's looked as good, not as any quarterback in the country. Over the last 2 games, Yogi, you can make an argument, he's looked as good in a 2-week span as any quarterback in the history of college football.
Yeah. Well, part of it is development. Part of it is the system. Part of it is him. If you've known Fernando, he's been called the mayor everywhere he goes because he's so affable. His ability to communicate and connect with anybody. I love what Coach Signetti said after the game. He's like, he's an amazing person. And that is true. His care factor, like every one of these guys under center, is through the roof. But his experience is different than everybody we've talked about today in terms of what he's gone through. This is a guy who was a 2-star recruit, was going to go to the Ivy League, ended up coming out west to Cal, ended up kind of falling into the job after injuries. Other guys didn't work out. And when he got it, he didn't let it go. And now he's in the Big Ten playing for Indiana and offensive coordinator Mike Shanahan and Chandler Whitmer, the quarterback coach. And you're right. He just continues to take giant leaps in terms of anticipating when the ball is out, whether it's a zone read, a run pass option type of play, utilizing his legs, knowing the situation, and he knows it. I mean, go back 2 weeks ago. He had 1 incompletion, and he gets absolutely ripped on the sideline from his head coach, and he just wears it. He's like, yep, not good enough. And I love that because I think, again, that's a ripple effect through your team. So Fernando, a lot of hype in the offseason. We're curious if he was going to be able to replace Curtis Rourke. Curtis Rourke was top 10 in the Heisman at the end of that season. We got a long way to go, but I think with the body of work we have seen from Fernando Mendoza, we should continue to expect him to take strides every week. This week's opportunity at Iowa.
Yeah, Curtis Rourke was top 10 in the Heisman. Right now, Fernando Mendoza is the co-favorite to win the Heisman. I know we're 4 weeks in, but that is pretty lofty for the Indiana Hoosier quarterback. Coming up on Saturday, don't forget a football doubleheader kicks off with Rutgers against Minnesota. Yogi on the call. Then Northwestern hosts UCLA. Coverage begins with countdown to kickoff 11:30 Eastern, 8:30 Pacific on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Tailgate. Time for us to take you around the Big Ten. Preseason hockey rankings have been released by USCHO. Not sure there's ever been a season in which we anticipate so highly the Big Ten season, thanks to the arrival of outstanding players like Penn State's Gavin McKenna. But the Nittany Lions, at number 5 in the country preseason, actually trail Big Ten favorite Michigan State, who is number 3. Minnesota also top 10. And your updated AVCA volleyball rankings, not a lot of change, certainly not at the top, where undefeated Nebraska remains number 1. Speaking of volleyball, Wednesday, don't miss a doubleheader as conference play gets underway. First, number 1 Nebraska takes on Michigan. Then Indiana faces Northwestern. Coverage starts 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific on the Big Ten Network in the Fox Sports app. 45 seconds left with Yogi Roth to regale us with tales from the road. Yogi?
Well, I got to experience jump around for the first time, and it was absolutely amazing in Wisconsin. I know the season's been a challenge, but I'm a believer in everything Luke Fickell is building. They got to get healthy, the quarterback, but jump around to me was something I'll always remember. And then my flight home, I got to stumble into Ashley Adamson. We sat next to each other, had a couple hours. We had the TV on, we had the games on. It was an all-time way to end a Saturday.
Wait, and you mean you had a brat and some cheese curds and a Leinenkugel while you waited for your flight, right? That's what you meant to say.
A version of that. Yeah, a version of that. Yeah, you're right.
See, these damn healthy California guys. All right, we'll see you again on Wednesday for Big Ten Today.